Hello all. It's been a long time again, I think. I haven't even checked when the last time I did a video was. But here we are again, another crisis back home in the United States. There's a lot on my mind, but I'm going to try and distill it within a certain amount of time. I tend to do videos that are about 25 or 30 minutes long or so. Some longer, some somewhat shorter. But I've been trying to hone this down. I have nobody to edit my videos, so please forgive me. I'm going to have to go off of a few notes I have in a notebook here. Uh, this video is going to be concerned primarily about uh, the implications of Roe versus Wade being overturned, the tragedy that this is, and then what we should be doing about this. That I think should be done personally, and I think many other intelligent people that I think are cool also would argue that is appropriate or wise to do. So starting with it, uh, for those who aren't aware, and again, this is just the bare bones information. There's a lot of detail and nuance. Some of the stuff I've had to go over so many things, and there's a lot of information to pour over. So some of the details get fuzzy after a while, but I get the gist of it. In essence, Roe versus Wade protected the abortion rights of women. It's being overturned by the conservatives in our Supreme Court because Trump, right? And also because Biden didn't really do much to kind of push back against their influence. I'm really frustrated with the Democrats right now. I'm wearing my little shirt here that says it's my Marx shirt that I bought. Irony. Uh, says when life gives you lemons, destroy capitalism. And that's what a major theme of this is going to be about. Is that fundamentally I see all this in connection. There's a lot of these different things overlap with each other. So, for example, I've noticed that why do billionaires care about how many babies are whether there are babies being born or aborted or all this stuff. I understand why religious people care because the Bible or something, right? It tells them the magic stuff. They have magic rules that they're supposed to follow. So I mean, if it's in the book and it adds up in their book, then that's what they follow typically, right? But for wealthy people like Elon Musk being worried about the birth rate was something I thought was interesting more recently. It was a couple weeks ago, but he mentioned it in his Twitter, and I was like, why would a billionaire care so much about the birth rate? It doesn't make he's rich. Why does he give a fuck? He's it's he has a kid, but it's his he's pretty secure for the foreseeable future, especially under a capitalist system because he has the capital, so he's gonna be okay, right? But then I thought about it. The reason he's concerned, and any wealthy person would be concerned, is because if you have abortion available, that means that there are going to be less poor people, because then people can choose when to have children. And basically, if you have a kid when you're not prepared for it, it's like a financial disaster. It's almost guaranteed, and especially in this economy, right? There's that. And then what if more pure, why would more poverty be useful to a billionaire? Because then they can exploit the fuck out of the people. I gotta stop cursing. Then they can exploit people more excessively and more viciously than they already do under the capitalist system, right? So this is why he might not say this outright or might not think this outright, but he made a comparison between China's workers and American workers, and he said basically something along the lines of Chinese workers work harder or something, and they're willing to take less or something, basically a suffering Olympics of sorts, right? And I hate when people have to resort to this situation, this kind of argument, and this is a bad juxtaposition. This is playing on nationalism, which I think is BS. I already went over entire videos on nationalism and capitalism, which you can revisit if you feel like it. Those are quite lengthy as well. But in essence, he was playing on nationalism. Why don't Americans don't want to work anymore? Da, da, da. Why do we have a labor shortage? Maybe because the wages haven't. I guess I'm cursing. Maybe because the wages haven't have been, well, maybe because the wages have been stagnating for such a lengthy period of time. Maybe because you don't necessarily pay your workers that well to be able to do the kind of long hours and work that they do, or give them the benefits that they need, etc., etc. And this is not just for Jeff Bezos or for Elon Musk. It's for any number of wealthy people. Billionaires kind of have a similar MO by and large. Specific ones, especially like the Waltons, the Koch brothers, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. They have similar playbook, and they get their wealth often like almost exclusively through like very sophisticated exploitation, very sophisticated exploitation that people don't like because of their faith in capitalism they buy into. And this is why the wealthy people generally are like pro pro life supposedly, right? It's actually pro like indentured servitude is what they really are for. And I find it's kind of funny because I think they really probably believe in their minds, some of them, not all of them. I think some of them are actually very honest and intelligent enough to be able to like they're like consciously evil, which at least I can respect because they're like open about it, right? Like the Koch brothers, I think are pretty consciously evil, and they just come up with very sophisticated ways of demonstrating like their arguments. They make sense if your goal is to like make money over like human flourishing or destroy the environment. But I mean, but make money for yourself and your people or whatnot, right? But for society, for civilization, not good. No bueno, right? So moving forward, that's why billionaires and wealthy people tend to uphold the system that's economic system, market system, capitalist system. Basically, let the market run shit, right? And this is bad for business for normal people, but good for business for very rich people and like a small subset of people. And capitalism's a pyramid. Like the rich people are on top, everybody else below them, and the division between rich and poor is growing much more and more. And this abortion Roe versus Wade overturn just plays into that further. And so it's interesting the wedding between, like, we used to have a fight between religion or like church and state, right? We're supposed to be separated. But again, once again, church and state, like, they don't admit that this is generally the case. Like, they don't want to say that it's religion that's fueling Roe versus Wade. But fundamentally, it is sort of religion, almost like primarily, that is fueling Roe versus Wade being overturned. Like, the areas that are able to cut, like, it's a strategic game. And so the conservative states have been working for a long, long period of time to try and get, like, change the game in their favor. And they've given off the facade of wanting to be able to like work and do things according to the rule book while at the same time working to rewrite the rules, and then getting mad whenever the Democrats or anybody left of the Democrats, especially people left of the Democrats, try to like suggest new rules that are favorable oftentimes to both parties. Actually, even like the Affordable Care Act benefited conservatives as well. Like they also are getting the cheaper health care, right? They also benefit if they get cheaper medicine or others. Like, it's frustrating. But religion and corporatocracy kind of have like teamed up to like push off leftists, and it's frustrating because I've observed leftists kind of infighting amongst each other. Whether it doesn't matter what kind of leftist they are, whether it's Peace and Freedom Party or Green Party or leftward Democrats. I would guess the Justice Democrats or the DSA constitute the socialist-ish wing of the Democrats, which is like the progressive wing. I don't even like using progressive anymore because I feel like it's been like abused. It's been like everybody wants to take the label without doing the effort of actually achieving progress, or at least trying really hard, right? AOC, I think, sincerely is trying. There are moments where I've been somewhat disappointed, but that's another story. She recently suggested action that Biden could perhaps take that seemed really sensible, and similar to something that happened for Obama a while back when there was a pipeline issue. Obama could have possibly brought the U.S. military, because he's the commander-in-chief, could have brought the U.S. military to the protests and stuff to kind of instantiate peace and protect the protesters, but he didn't. And that was something that was an area of disappointment for me for Obama. I'm not like, I've grown less and less a fan of Obama since after his presidency, but of course I voted for like Jill Stein the second time around. So like I voted for him the first time and I voted for him the second time. I voted based upon what my sincere beliefs were, and not just out of like a fear of like the system collapsing because I didn't vote for the Democrat. However, you have to be very strategic. Everywhere you vote, like I'm in California, my votes will, like, I hate the fucking electoral college, but my votes will not count the same way. So I'm technically can get away with voting specific ways, and it's just frustrating because our political system, our electoral system, all this stuff, especially at the national level right now, it just that's for a long time, uh, have been set up in a way that's just like really like a clusterfuck. It's like it's intended to be kind of like in favor of these smaller states and these conservative states, and it's BS to me because I come from a more populous state, and the more populous states have a duty to kind of provide. Like if they don't produce results and prosperity for their citizens, they're going to have to move somewhere else, and they won't have a big population. So I view kind of the population size as being a representation of how well a state is able to govern its people. If people flock to that location, there must be something about that location that's like prosperous, right? In theory, right? But that aside, Roe versus Wade. I don't want to like detract too much from this, but we all are like those of us who know and care about the overturn of Roe versus Wade. I won't even try to argue with people who don't know or don't care, because there's just a lot of people who don't know and don't care until it's too late. But yeah, for those of us who are aware of what the weight of this is, I'm kind of preaching to the choir, so forgive me for that. But I do want to like show how these things kind of intersect and interconnect. The economy, having babies, and like our political system and economic systems are all intertwined. And the reason things are the way they are is because our economic system is a capitalist system. We do not have a system that favors human flourishing over profit and capital. We do not have an economic system that favors the environment over humanity, over capital and profit, right? So these are like different problems, but ultimately like they kind of overlap enough that you can see which camps which are going to fall into. So a lot of for conservatives, their main concerns, you have theocrats oftentimes, and not only, but majority, you'll see theocrats, people who want religion to be in government or to run government, right? And that's your like Mike Pence. Mike Pence was like fucking, as I think, explicitly a theocrat. In case I think many of our politicians and even our justices seem to be like theocrats, but it's like a weird kind of Sharia law type thing for them because they're like they're not very representative of any of the values that they claim to hold, but they want to enforce upon other people. It's kind of weird. But again, I'm arguing for secular government, so I don't really want like to deal with like having them inject religious elements about life and death into like our laws and civil liberties and stuff, and extending rights to like they'll give rights to corporations which are not human or a fetus or anything, and like they'll give rights to things that don't need to have rights, and then take rights from people who already exist and need those rights, or disenfranchise them basically, whether they're people of color or LGBTQ people or poor people or like homeless people, like any number of people who they can keep. And like again, these people at the top of the pyramid, the major capitalists fundamentally, they don't have to work really, right? Uh, these people basically feed off of the suffering of all the layers below them. This is the pyramid, and we are what powers the capitalist system, the workers. If you remove the workers just stop working. We just put our hands in our pockets, as they say. The system cannot function. It will stop. And then, like, until we have, like, amazing robot technology and it's, like, super cheap and stuff, like, many capitalists, especially Elon Musk and others, are trying to find ways to replace their workers. And if you look around, you'll see, like, machines at self-checkout and stuff, like, little things to try and reduce the like workers that they have to have at their establishment. But fundamentally, like for now at least, workers still have a lot of power, but only collectively. And so let me go over the last of these points really quickly. I want to make sure I touch on everything I wrote down. So Roe versus Wade, what does this mean? What is it? What does it do? It restricts women's rights to be able to get an abortion, especially in specific states that are like anti-choice, that claim to be pro-life. But if you look at most of the anti-choice states, you would never claim that they are pro-life based upon like their health care, the poverty, any number of things. Like there's a bunch of factors, incarceration rates. Like if they were really pro-life, there's a lot of stuff I would see changed. I would like to believe, right? Yeah. Furthermore, it causes harm because a lot of women who need to get abortions for any number of reasons, from ranging from rape or like medical complications, might not be able to easily get them. And also, this adds a whole bunch of stress on somebody who might already be existing, like be experiencing existing trauma of some kind of weight. Like unplanned pregnancies are like stressful experience, right? And costly. So, and of course, there's also the religious and other people who are like trying to shame and like attack the character of people who are in a situation like, and it's often disingenuous because like if they were in that situation, they would want access to these things oftentimes, and it's frustrating because for the issue of abortion, just if you don't believe in abortions, you yourself cannot get an abortion. It's that simple. But you should not deprive other people of the right to be able to get an abortion. So, moving on, this also, the overturn of this, which was a 50 plus year precedent, if I recall correctly, it's like a long period of time, right? It opens the door for reconsidering. And I think it was Justice Thomas, Clarence Thomas, piece of, I hate this guy. I'm so sad, like, nature did not get rid of him before he could cause more damage to the world. And it's frustrating, but, like, it's, again, not necessarily nature's fault for him not, like, going by way of natural causes. It's really ultimately the non-GOP, non-conservative people in America's fault, collectively, for not, like, fighting to get him pushed out of power. Like, he should not be in a position of power. He's, like, almost dead, right? If I recall. And if I recall also, for when Ruth Bader Ginsburg was dying, they were, like throwing parties and stuff, basically, or they were, like, praying for her death. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not hoping that, like, these people I view as being genuinely evil and actively evil. I'm not, like, I'm, for reasons of, like, collective suffering being lessened, both theirs and especially society and civilizations, I'm actually hopeful that, yeah, like, let them, like, hopefully nature takes them back. Like, they need to go away. But we can politically depose them. Like, it's not beyond the realm of possibility for the people. Like, Biden could do things, and I'm going to get to that point later, but, like, there's different things even within the heavily flawed and gamed system we're playing with it right now, the electoral system we have right now, that's kind of screwy still, and yet we haven't really done much to try and fix it. And that's not an accident. The people in power, oftentimes both Democrats and Republicans, but especially conservatives, especially Republicans, are cool with keeping the rules at least as they are, and if possible, bending them to their will. And usually the ones who are more successful at bending the structure or the system to their will are usually conservatives. Like, they're very dedicated, and they have no shortage of resources to do so. Like, the donations, Koch brothers, they got all the billionaire donors, they got all the religion money from people who are just like, you can say, like, it's for Jesus or something, and they'll just throw money at it. Because, like, they're like the toxic. There are some I've met, and not my family are also, many of my family members are also Christians, but I think, yeah, it's lots of, that's a whole nother video. But generally speaking, there's a lot of toxic Abrahamic religious followers in the United States, especially. And it's ironic because, like, we go to fight extremism in other countries and we denounce it elsewhere, but in the United States, it's alive and well, and causing real lasting damage, such as the overturn of Roe versus Wade, so on. So yeah, if Roe versus Wade has been overturned, which it has now for the time being, unless we do something, like, collectively to address this and have a movement to fix these things, a socialist movement to address the capitalist system and evolve it into a socialist economy. But it's basically opened up a whole bunch of other long-term precedents to being reconsidered, which is basically, for conservatives, their way of saying, we want to overturn these decisions so that, like, they can basically grab more power. It's fundamentally what's going on. And it's sad because, like, Democrats, I don't know if sincerely or, like, on acts, like, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I don't think it really matters for me. Because it just ends up like, end of the day, if they mess up, they messed up. And if they're consistently messing up, we need to do something. Like, it's the people who vote for them and people who provide money and stuff. It's a job to collectively come together and be like, this is not cool. We want this platform. Are you for this platform, or are you not getting our money? And what's sad is, like, Democrats, especially establishment Democrats like Nancy Pelosi, or like any of the conservative Democrats, like what's his name? There's so many politicians, it's hard to keep track of them. It'll come to me later. I'm not relevant, but like, there are people who are considered Democrats in name only. I'm trying to remember his name. It'll come to me later. There's a lot of people, but there's at least 2 or 3 that I can there were on my mind. I forgot, but there are conservative Democrats, and then there are establishment Democrats who are not necessarily conservative, but they're open to aligning with conservative stuff out of like convenience, and it's usually a convenience and for them more so than for like society. And so we end up with a lot of Democrats who are like kind of pushovers, in my opinion. And I understand the job is pretty hard, right, to some extent, but so is like everybody's job, right? Like, if you're working a Amazon factory, your job is also hard, right? So they get paid larger sums of money and have way better healthcare than we get. They should be doing their job quite well, and if not, we should like find people who can do their job better, right? And who can sincerely like improve the electoral and political system we have, and not regress it further or let it continue to stagnate, right? And that's also something that's going to happen, is like, we haven't really updated our political system for a long period of time. So a lot of the rules have been able to be exploited because they're old. Like, nobody's done anything to fix old problems. And so like, they're not going to get better. Often they get worse, such as with the filibuster. So yeah, the rulings regarding the EPA might be overturned. So that means more pollution. Rulings regarding like private, like right to privacy in the bedroom, and like having interracial marriages and stuff, like a bunch of stuff that should have been like, we used to take for granted, are now on the table for being reconsidered. And there's like, again, I don't think the conservatives are the majority in America, but they have pockets, and it's especially in electoral college, and if it's a gerrymandered system, we're going to be in significant like trouble, because they still, even if they're in like a small number, they know how to use their power more effectively than a bunch of divided people, which is frustrating because, again, like I mentioned before, the left, everybody like left of AOC, everybody left of AOC and left, are not necessarily the best at coordinating and working together, and like, we're often infighting about nuances when we have like a lot of overlap of things we could be agreeing upon and getting done. We could at least get the overlap stuff done, and then maybe like push back against each other and do more internal affairs stuff after we have like something to work from. We have no we have very minimal or no framework to even build upon to be able to get universal health care yet, or like to basically get a pathway to citizenship effectively. There's a lot of stuff that we could just like do more effectively, and like almost all leftists generally agree upon, more or less, that we're just like not able to get done. And I don't know if it's like people have given up faith. Like, I understand the electoral system is not the best, and there's a lot of other things you can do, but you also, I would argue, you should also use all the tools. So if you use elections and stuff, you do electoral like, you vote, right? You participate in politics, you educate other people, do policy change and stuff, and then elect different representatives or get rid of bad ones, et cetera, et cetera. But you also have to engage in like stuff that like is inconvenient, and that's like where the activism comes in. You have to engage in direct action. But I'll get to that. Let me go over again. Roe versus Wade, bad for women, bad for everybody, actually. Economically, this will hurt a lot of people, and it's gonna, like, there are gonna be a lot of people who actually die because of this ruling. But again, I'm doing this video, but ultimately I'm expecting to be preaching to the choir. I don't expect conservatives or people like that are like Republican or anything to really co-sign this argument. I don't expect, and I understand their value systems their value systems are fundamentally like often antithetical to my own and people on the left. And that's why we're at this position. It's like, I want to get on the next point, is that we're kind of like in a cold civil war part two. Like, it's not like direct fighting between two sides, but fundamentally this is like a cold war between like political factions. And it's really, the conservatives are just better at working together even when they're not intending to work together. Like, it's this is going to require a whole other video to go into, so let's just focus on the Roe versus Wade part. But fundamentally, I'm arguing that we're sort of in a cold civil war. We're not an active hot war, but politically speaking, there's a divide between multiple value systems, and you could group them into twos for now, like fundamentally left and right, and the right are winning more ground for their values than the left is able to hold, not even gain, hold of their own values, right? Hold in terms of laws, policies, representatives, and protections, etc., right? So moving on, we touch on rightists, theocrats, billionaires, corporatists. Like, fundamentally, like, these people, they're not usually very poor, although some religious people often are, but a lot of them might be like able to be drawn into the same camp, and when they combine, they have a lot of resources at their disposal. Not to mention, like, not that I don't like saying liberals, but liberals have some resources at their disposal, but again, we're like kind of really bad. It's like if you had multiple armies, one small army that's really effective will beat a larger force if they are not well, like, oriented, right? Not well organized and structured and trained, right? And that's what I think is kind of happening. Like, Mitch McConnell, I hate the guy, but in terms of strategy, he's a genius. He's a evil genius. He's like freaking like Emperor Palpatine. Like, he seems like him too. But yeah, like that level of like manipulation and power and wealth and just control. Like, yeah, and it echoes in many characters within the GOP, Republicans and conservatives and so forth. So yeah, moving on. How did it come to this? Essentially, capitalism, the capitalist system, our economic system, has influenced how our political system functions, and vice versa, right? But more so, our economy basically kind of has increasingly dominated how rules are written and interpreted within our society. And so it's now becoming a situation where many of the people who are disadvantaged are people of color or like LGBTQ, people already historically at a disadvantage are being squeezed even more so again, just when they had started to gain a little bit of ground. And it was like, maybe you get like the like legalization, maybe legalization of marijuana. It's not even at the national level yet. And then gay marriage. That was like, we got like, I think fundamentally like 2 to 5 things roughly, if you include the Affordable Care Act, I guess. And even that's kind of like was a half-assed thing. We didn't really get the full thing. So yeah, and the battle for our values, there is a civil war going on in the United States. And I think the right has always been conscious of like what they are fighting for in terms of their values, and they're never under illusion that they were going to be able to compromise. For them, it was conquest, and we were fools, kind of believing that like there would be a compromise that would be lasting compromise. Like, that is not in the nature of our opposition, and that's not how our economic system is oriented. Our economic system is predicated upon dominance, not compromise, right? And so our political system, likewise, is oriented chiefly in terms of domination, not compromise. We have a two-party system, so we only have 2 choices, and if they're both bad, we are in trouble, right? And it's hard to affect change from the bottom up. So what do we do to fight back? I'm going to try and wrap this up really quickly. So we have to, of course, I think, my opinion in terms of like potential options of what we can do. Of course, I think everybody should pursue the electoral strategy and fight for our representatives to do their job, write them. We have to collectively organize first, I think. I've like a kind of a mantra I'm working towards of organize, educate, advocate, agitate, right? Something along those lines. I'm gonna fine tune it later, but fundamentally, it's important that we engage in activism and direct action in addition to electoral politics. But we need the electoral politics too. We cannot, like, at this point, we're at a huge disadvantage, regardless of the numbers of liberals or leftists out there, which I differentiate. Leftists are generally more inclined towards activism, and liberals are more inclined towards electoral politics. But we need them to coordinate more effectively, right? And it's frustrating because liberals are often super pro capitalism, especially if they're neoliberals, and so it's frustrating because like it's the situation of you have AOC and Nancy Pelosi, and they have to like act like they like each other, even though like one's way more comfortable with how things are than the other, right? I'll leave it at that. Uh, so yeah, we have to fight at the state and national level through electoral politics, ballot box, policy change. Some states like California let you come up with ballot initiatives, get signatures signed off on. But we again have to organize and educate and like work together collectively because that's the only power people who are marginalized have is we are the majority. Like almost certainly we are the majority, and they make it like under capitalism it is actually probably necessary for us to be the majority in order for them to be able to have the max, like the obscene wealth and power that they have is derived from the majority of our suffering. So we have to coordinate to be able to combat that. And it's just a fact that a lot of us are ignorant or lacking information about like history and philosophy or economics and such. And it's hard for us to have these conversations because they're like sensitive topics and everybody's kind of fighting for their own like banner when we should be a united banner of like left, a pan left platform of sorts, right? Like we should all generally care about LGBTQ rights, the environment, uh, like fair, like livable wages, more democratic workplace, uh, like family leave. Like there's all that, like a socialist, a communist, a Green Party person, a peace and freedom person, and of course the Democrats. You would hope, although unfortunately a lot of them neoliberal, but the majority of people left of AOC would generally agree these are all necessary and important goods that need to be like top priorities, and yet they've been pushed to the wayside for like infinity now. And we've been able to like spark a little bit of conversation about them here and there, but again, it ends up being like we talk about the shit, we don't do anything, and it's really frustrating because I feel like Democrats survive off of like a state of emergency. Like they count on emergencies to get them elected, but then they have to do the work to like if they want to be saviors and frame themselves as saviors, they have to do the saving work after they have power. And presently, Democrats have some power, not all the power. It took a lot of work to get where we're at now, but like they have some power. And this is what I'm gonna get into next. Put pressure on reps. This includes the president, and to use every avenue available to counter and soften the blow of the overturn of Roe versus Wade and everything else intertwined with that and to come yet. And also to buy time for us to fix this stuff and like organize to counter this like evil from the right. Also, Biden has to stop being kind of a bitch. Like Biden is frustrating because he's like out of touch, and I feel like he's kind of Trump light, but at the same time he's not Trump, and he's like it's not hard not to be Trump, but it's also just like yeah, he's not doing enough. Let's put it that way. That's enough to say right there. I think it's universally across the board. Most people will say Biden is not doing enough, at least at present, especially after this overturn of Roe versus Wade. Now he's done some things, and people like again have to juxtapose him to like a greater evil of the Republicans winning, right? Again, so they're surviving on the state of like we are not going to advance a person who has like progressive ideas. We're going to advance somebody who has like safe sounding ideas because we're afraid of like changing public opinion. And that's what Democrats really need to start focusing on, is changing, and not just Democrats, like everybody on the left, everybody, AOC left, like AOC and everybody left of her need to coordinate in a pan-leftist unified platform to try and work together across party lines and other lines to challenge the forces of darkness that are represented by the GOP and conservatives and rightists, et cetera, right? The theocrats, the billionaires, the neoliberals, even if it's necessary. Neoliberals tend to go either side, so like a neoliberal will usually side, in my opinion, from my observations, I think neoliberals tend to go with whatever's convenient. So actually, if leftists looked like they were in charge or they were like making progress, neoliberals would probably sort of lean towards them, even though that I don't think that's like historically how it's worked. If it looked like they were, it's only because I think that historically leftists have not been as powerful, so that's why they have always tend to like go wherever the wind blows. The wind just tends to blow towards the right because they are able to amass power through military and like militarizing the police and abusing laws in favor of, yeah. So there's that. And so, is that everything? Let me see. So, Biden needs to stop being a bitch, cancel student loans, like put forward, draft a new Green New Deal, open abortion clinics. AOC mentioned this. He has the power technically to open abortion clinics on federal land, and I'm sure some of the tribal land. I mean, the United States government has been really shitty to Native Americans, so I wouldn't be mad at them if they were not open to that idea. But I'm sure many tribal land, if they were compensated, would be open to having abortion clinics on where they are too, and it would actually maybe be of help to them as well if they had that kind of investment into where they are. So there's that. And then, of course, expand the fucking Supreme Court. At this point, it's fucking like, you need to do over. Expand the Supreme Court. Like, the situation has been extreme. You should, like, honestly, he should have expanded it before it got to this. Like, I would have suggested doing that way before, because, like, Trump already had skewed how the balance of power on the Supreme Court. It was leaning more and more conservative after Trump. And so, they weren't necessarily the most, like, leftward people to begin with. You had maybe like 2 or 3 people max that were sort of left, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, so like, yeah, it's not good. That's pissed me off because like what's his name's almost dead, and like he still wields so much power. Clarence Thomas, God, evil person. Evil really doesn't like want to go, right? It's really hard. It takes a long time for them to go. But I guess they would say that about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? I think highly of her to some extent, but at the same time, I have my own personal feelings about stuff that I think maybe she could have done better, or like, yeah, just like with Obama. But that's aside. So expand the Supreme Court, and then don't sing songs on Capitol Hill if you think that's not good. That's the last thing that's gonna solve anybody's problems. Singing songs or doing that, these symbolic victories things, like. I get the Democrats are like counting on people's donations, and the state of emergency kind of encourages this, but people are gonna get tired of appealing. It's like praying to God over and over again, but God doesn't do anything for you. So like you get to the point like why the fuck am I praying? Like if you're gonna just continue to ignore me, and this is from somebody I identify like I align myself with Buddhist philosophy, so I don't subscribe to Abrahamic metaphysics, but I understand how it generally functions, right? But yeah, like I don't understand like why pay into a system that does not reward you or the people you love. And so that's what I say, that's what the capitalist system is, and that's also what our political system is under capitalism, under the influence of capitalism, right? And it's hard to fix any of these things unless we were to switch our economic system and evolve it to a socialist planned economy. But I'll get into that maybe another video. I've talked about it a little bit before. Yeah, no more of this counting on emergencies for changing votes. Like, we have to make the Democrats realize, like, they have to produce results. They have to do drastic things, like expand the Supreme Court, or, like, cancel student debt, and open abortion clinics on federal land. Like, you gotta show that you, like, are about that life. like really, it's kind of appropriate, right? You have to show that you are the pro-life, and they are pro-death, essentially, right? Because they're basically going to leave out anybody who wants to have an abortion to die, right? So there's that. And then no more timidity. If you don't deliver, you can't expect people to vote for you. It's that simple. And it's frustrating because there are some Democrats. I like Ilhan Omar. I like AOC. They're not perfect, but like I think they do a pretty good job. I've donated to them. I think they're really set, like intelligent and like as progressive as Democrats are capable of getting, right? And there also tend to be like there's a lot of neoliberals and conservatives even within the Democrats' ranks. I think we need to like deal with some of the Democrats who are clearly conservatives just with a label of a Democrat. That's something that needs to be addressed because this holding stuff hostage stuff, it's got to stop. Like they might as well just like we're it's essentially like letting the hostage be held hostage so long that they're basically going to die of old age. And neoliberals are kind of scared to rock the boat, the capitalist boat, and they want donations from oligarchs. So that's part of the reason they don't often propose these more drastic policy changes because they're afraid of losing some of their bigger donors. And again, that's why normal people who are workers have to unite under socialist philosophy and economic theory and beliefs and push for a change in how our representatives behave, who our representatives are, transparency, accountability, and all that stuff, right? But also, at the same time, be internally gracious and forgiving, I think, within the left. Because I feel like there's often a overwillingness to like cannibalize, whereas the GOP, like they can do like horrible things and they'll still fight for each other. It's kind of ridiculous. And I know like some people pose that as like a toxic thing, but in terms of like strategy and getting things done, it's kind of like at least working for them. So like might want to start copying what we can of strategy if it's functioning effectively to some extent. And at least until we can do better and have a better system, right? Moving on. So educate, advocate, agitate, engage in direct action. That's like basically putting yourself on the line. You have to obstruct. That's the people who bother to like put themselves in freeways, as frustrating as it is. That's still a way of kind of obstructing capitalism. So oftentimes, if the economy is under threat, politicians change their minds often much more quickly. And so, like millions of people can die, and it might do something, but like politicians will move more quickly if the economy is involved. So yeah, as workers, we have the power collectively. We just have to like organize and educate each other and have solidarity and like work consciously and be transparent and accountable. Like it's possible, right? At least model the kind of transparency and accountability we wish our government actually had and our police force and other forces had, right? I think socialism is, and everything left of socialism, leftist philosophy and economics are generally the natural predator of like vicious capitalism. And so I was thinking, I thought of a poem by, what's his name? I have it on my phone. German fellow, right? I learned about all this stuff a long time ago, and some people's names come to mind, or the quotes that they said, and I'll remember who they are. But his name's Martin Niemöller, right? I don't know how to pronounce that properly. Niemöller? But essentially, he had the quote that's really, really well known, I think. But if it's not, I hope you get to hear it now. And fundamentally, it says this. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So that's something I think everybody left of AOC, because I don't know, like, don't count on centrist Democrats or anybody that's basically a conservative Democrat who's basically like a Democrat name only. Everybody on the left really needs to think about this quote, I think, and start looking at each other and because we are each other's, like, we come together, can fight this, we can fix this, but we have to acknowledge that it's going to take drastic measures. It's going to take sacrifice. It's going to take inconvenience, and like, it's frustrating because like an individual like the amount of weight an individual has to carry and sacrifice is much less if it's spread over millions of people. If a million people or billion people sacrifice a small amount, it has the effects of one person, like not even more than one person, like many people, like 100 people sacrificing everything, right? This is my conceptual like example, right? And so I noted that like there are a lot of people I see in the United States and elsewhere around the world who are sacrificing like a lot and perhaps everything. And some people have no choice because they have like they're in that they're belong to the category of people that are being oppressed. As a black person, as a black male, I belong to a category of people that have been long oppressed in the United States and elsewhere. And also I'm part Latin American, so like that also constitutes a class of people who have been like screwed over historically, right? And especially within the United States and elsewhere. But there's a pattern here. Like we have so much to work together on, and we need to start coordinating as like with the sophistication our opposition have, and with the sense of solidarity and unity that they seem to have. Like even if it's just a short-term thing for them, like they're able to work together quite effectively. Granted, they have lost immense resources, but look at it this way: when we work together, we can take back those resources because those resources were more than likely, almost certainly, stolen from our people, our peoples. All right, whether you are LGBTQ, whether you're a woman, whether you're black or Latin American or whatever, any subcategory of people who are not represented as the majority in Congress and the Senate and as president right now. Yeah. So please think about that. I hate that this video has gone almost 50 minutes, but it's a serious issue, and I wanted to try and go over everything. So that's, I think, pretty much everything. See anything else? Just basically work together, coordinate against, and use all the tools and avenues available to us, and be willing to sacrifice as much as is possible. Because it's not just us; it's literally the future of our country and our world, and the fate, like wars, like so many things are going to happen, and our inaction is contributing to like all sorts of other problems. The whole, even the situation in Ukraine right now is a result of lots of inaction or wrong action by the United States up to this point. And we could have done lots of things to mitigate that conflict and many others before they became out of control. So I'll end on that note. Yeah. Fight on. Not me, us.